Right, I was born at a very young age in Liskeard, and I lived on a farm in St Eve, and I had 5 brothers and sisters. But also living with us was my granddad, who was a very stern man. And to be honest, we were all afraid of him. So I think anxiety for me began at a very young age. And I didn't really know any different. We led a fairly sheltered life, just living and working on the farm. We went to chapel, Sunday school and youth club, all at the same place, at the Methodist chapel in St Eve. And it was good. It was good. It's funny how when you look back on your life, the traumatic things seem to be the things you remember more than happy times. That's how I remember things. I don't remember much about my school life other than the traumatic things. And I remember in the reception class wetting myself through the Lord's Prayer. It was too long, far too long. And it's funny, that's the only thing I can remember from when I was about 4 or 5. And when I was a bit older, I can remember being in assembly, a hall full of children, and me and the girl next to me being hauled up to the stand up on the stage because we were talking during assembly. I wasn't talking, I was listening, but I got dragged up on the stage. I was mortified because I was a good girl. And the other time, I think I was way up in the primary school then. This is all at Callington, by the way. I went to Callington Primary and Comprehensive School. And in one of the upper years of the primary school, I was hauled in front of the headmaster and accused of kissing a boy in the back of a coach on a school trip. And if only I was brave enough to tell the headmaster that it didn't happen because I didn't know how to kiss. But I was too shy. But something happened to me when I was 9 that really was to have a big impact on my life. I was very shy and I found it hard to make friends. And there was one girl that I really liked and I really wanted to be friends with her, and I worked really hard to build that friendship, and I felt we'd got somewhere, and I was happy. And it was a Friday afternoon. We had art, and towards the end of the lesson the teacher said, right, if somebody could wash up the paint pots, please. And I thought, oh, me. But my friend Rebecca said, me. And we argued. And I really didn't want her to win. And we argued quite a bit, and I won. And I felt really pleased, but a little bit guilty that I'd argued with this girl who I really could call my friend at last. Anyway, I washed up the paint pots, had a lovely time, and off we went for the weekend. That weekend, she got knocked off her bike and killed. And I never told anybody. My family weren't the sort that you could talk to, share your feelings with. So I kept it all to myself, but I was really upset because I felt that my argument with her had killed her. That was how my 9-year-old mind translated it. And that's why I feel that counselling in schools these days is so important when something tragic happens, because, you know, I know what it feels like to go through something and suffer for a long time afterwards. anyway, I lived with that secret, really. As we were growing up, my two sisters who were older than me used to argue and fight a lot. And when they did that, I would run to my mum and tell her because I was afraid that one of my sisters would die. But my sisters took it that I was the telltale. I was mummy's pet. So it was all misconstrued. And I wasn't popular. And I just lived with the fear. Throughout my teenage years, I started to think about faith and what it was all about. I wasn't sure, but I thought to start with, I'd believe it just in case it was true. If there really was heaven and hell, then I ought to be on the right side. So I'll believe it just in case. And then as time went on, I learned a bit more. And I thought, maybe I'll wait till I retire, because then I can have a bit of fun, because chapel was a bit boring, to be honest. So I left it at that. And then at 16, I was involved in a car accident. And those that saw the accident happen didn't think that any of us would survive. We all walked out of the car unharmed. Some of us are sitting here today. And God was with us. And he saved our lives. So that night, I thought, I better get serious. I better not wait till I retire, because I might not make retirement. So I committed my life to the Lord, but I didn't tell anyone. I had no one to tell, no one I felt I could confide in. So life went on, and then when I was about 20, we had a lovely minister at chapel, and he invited me and a few others to go for what you would call confirmation meetings, and I went along, really enjoyed it. He was such a great teacher. And then we got to the service where we made our commitment. And as I was making that commitment, I really meant it. Something in my heart moved. And I knew that I'd taken another step. Anyway, life carried on. When I left school, I was working. I did a few jobs, but my main job was I worked at the vets at Liscard, which I absolutely loved. Started helping with animals and operations and such like, and went on to work in reception, dispensary, and eventually the lady who did the bookkeeping retired, and I took her place, and I loved it, loved my job. In that time also, I got married and I had 2 boys, and I carried on working part-time once the boys came along. And I worked there for 27 years. And I can remember sitting down one day in the office and saying, I love my job so much that it would take me a bomb to leave this place. I'm never going to leave. Little did I know what was ahead. Every year when it came to doing the accounts up for the accountant, it always got a bit stressful. There was a lot to do in a certain time, and I always got stressed each year, but I didn't, I made sure I got it all done. But this particular year, 2007, I had a phone call from the accountant. On the 15th of May, 2007, the accountant phoned and said, the lady that does your books is going to be on maternity leave from next week, so we need everything by the end of this week. And it was just impossible. I knew I couldn't do it. I put the phone down and I just collapsed, and I started shaking, and the bosses took over and took me into their little office and chatted to me and calmed me down. And then after a while they said, "Oh, well, at least you've stopped shaking." And I said, "That's only on the outside. On the inside, I'm still shaking." And from that time, I couldn't cope with anything. I couldn't cope with answering the phone because I suppose I was reliving that phone call that I'd just taken that was impossible. And I couldn't write a check. Back in those days, we were writing checks. I couldn't write because I was too shaky. And if anyone asked me a question, I couldn't speak. I tried my hardest to keep going, but in the end, I had to be signed off. The doctor signed me off, and I was having constant panic attacks. I found it hard to go out. I couldn't cope with noise. I couldn't cope with people. And yeah, it was really hard. A darkness came over me, the depression. It's like black clouds overhead. And I tried to keep going. I would go for walks and put music in my ears, Christian music, to try and, fill myself with God. I learned a psalm, the one that says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" I learned that whole psalm. It was really hard to learn, but I would walk up the road repeating that psalm to myself in my head, thinking that would help. But every time I would meet somebody on the street, I would freeze and go against the hedge or the wall and let them walk past me. I would, if I heard a car horn go, I would freeze and go into a panic, or lorry brakes, air brakes or anything. It was really hard to function. And God was nowhere near. I don't know where he was. People quoted scripture at me, scripture that Sharon read, "Do not be anxious about anything," and it didn't work. I was just a bundle of fear. Within a year, my marriage ended. I had to keep going for the boys. They were 12 and 14 by that time. I was sent to see a psychiatrist, and social worker was there, and I was petrified that she was going to take my boys away from me. And I was willing to fight, and I just kept going for them. I would, when they were off at school, I would go to bed or stare out the window, but as soon as they came home from school, I would pretend I was fine and live as normal a life as I could for them. For 4 years, I was unable to work. And then after 4 years, I recovered enough to find a job, a stress-free job that I'm still doing now, actually, which I'm very grateful for. And jumping ahead, in 2019, both boys left home around the same time. And I was still living in the same house in Liskeard, and I decided it was time to make a fresh start. So I moved to Callington. I'm a part of the Callington Gospel Choir, so I thought I'll move so I can be closer to that. And I was also by that time going to St Mary's Church at Callington, so I moved closer for that as well. And in St Mary's Church, there was a lovely vicar, Tony Stevens, and he came alongside me and counselled me for a little while. And it was while talking to him that I was able to tell him about Rebecca and how she, she had made such a big impact in my life and caused me to fear any confrontation or loud noises or arguments. And he prayed through it with me. And afterwards, I went to Golberdon, to where Rebecca's grave is. For the first time, I went to her grave. And I stood at that grave, and a picture came of her and another little girl skipping happily in heaven. And I was able to lay that grief to rest. I think it still affects me. I still don't like shouting noises, but I know that I didn't cause Rebecca's death. From then on, I built up my confidence and I became a worship leader at St Mary's and really enjoyed taking part in services and so on. And then COVID came. That vicar left and a new vicar came, and there's so many changes, and it was just time to make a move, to make a new start. And that's when I came here. I really felt to come here. And during my time here, I've been really grateful to Martin for counselling me as well, and helping me through lots of issues and praying through things. And I've struggled with the blackness of depression, sometimes getting worse, sometimes improving. But I've always had to pretend that that I wasn't depressed, because if you knew me as I felt, you wouldn't want to mix with me, because I was too miserable, I suppose. So when I went out, I always pretended I was okay. But around 2 months ago, I suddenly realised that the depression had gone. It just disappeared. And instead of sort of coming home from work and sitting in the chair and looking out the window thinking, now what? I suddenly had a zest for life and a zest for doing the housework even. Just anything, any little job would bring me joy. And I found joy again. I found joy in singing in the choir. For such a long time, I'd sung in the choir, but not really meant what I was singing because of depression. So I've gone 2 months now with no dark clouds over me, and it's great. But I have to say I still really struggle with anxiety, and I especially struggle at Christmas. I don't know why. It might be the tension I feel when you go in the shops, the crowded streets. I can't cope with crowds of people and noise, and I feel as a Christian I'm not very good at witnessing, because I don't go to the Honey Fair. When there's anything big going on in the town, I don't go because I can't face people, because I'm too anxious. Somebody mentioned about, could I come to the carols next Saturday? And I would love to go. And I thought this morning I will try to go. But then Martin mentioned there's going to be the town band there. I don't think I can cope with the town band. And sometimes they play outside Tesco, and I can't go into Tesco because I can't walk past the band because of the noise. So there's so many things that stop me from living how I would like to live, and I don't understand why. I think maybe I'm not a good enough Christian, but I just have to trust and just go with it, because I haven't really got a choice. And, maybe I can help somebody else because I understand what it's like. Or maybe if I didn't have this, maybe I would wander from God and drift because I don't need God, because I'm fine. I don't know. But I'm not leaving God, and I'm sure that God's not leaving me. So thank you for listening.